town of Tikrit, the oil refining town of Baiji, and nearing the capital, Baghdad. Iraqi security forces, following years of dollars in weaponry from the U.S., have melted away, leaving checkpoints unmanned and stripping themselves of their uniforms. Their American-supplied sites now in the hands of al-Qaeda-tied terrorists. Today, Iraq's foreign minister said his country's very survival is at stake.
I hope this incident really will lead all Iraqi leaders to come together to face this serious, mortal threat to the country.
U.S. officials say there are early signs of Iraqi Kurds coming together with government forces to respond to the attacks. And today, National Security Advisor Susan Rice said the U.S. will provide support under its Strategic Framework Agreement with Iraq.
We must do more to strengthen our partners' capacity to defeat the terrorist threat on their home turf by providing them the necessary training, equipment, and support.
Former U.S. Ambassador to Baghdad Jim Jeffrey says Washington must urgently do more, including providing air support to attack the militants.
This is no longer a messy situation. This is a catastrophe for the people of Iraq, for American policy, and for the entire region. This is an extremely dangerous situation. It appears that no force can stop these people.
U.S. help for now has been limited to training and arms sales, including F-16 and Apache helicopters, both recently approved but not yet delivered, things that would certainly be very useful in pushing back ISIS advances. I asked the White House and the Pentagon today about how the U.S. will respond with the situation deteriorating rapidly. Here's what NSC spokesperson Bernadette Meehan told me. She said, we have expedited shipments of military equipment since the beginning of the year and expanded our training programs both inside Iraq and in Jordan. Speaking to officials, they say that they are now considering other options. They won't say what those options are, but you get a sense that they're watching the situation extremely closely. They're very concerned.
Yeah, these cities are falling. Fallujah, Tikrit, as you point out, Mosul, a city of 2 million people, 500,000 people have now fled. And Nouri al-Maliki, the Shiite leader, the prime minister of Iraq, he's suggesting that Iraqi Sunni soldiers, they're taking off their uniforms. He says there's a conspiracy and they are fleeing.
Well, it's a damning charge. U.S. officials say there's no evidence of a conspiracy specifically. But here's the thing. The Iraqi military was meant to be a unifying force for Iraq, to bring together the Kurds in the north, the Shiites in the south, the Sunnis in the west, to be something of an identity for the country. So far, that hasn't borne out. There are, though, some positive signs now. You hear of Shiites in the south promising forces to respond, the Kurds working with the Iraqi military. Question is, are they up to the task? So far, doesn't look like they're up to it.
Jim, hold on for a moment. I want to bring Bobby Ghosh. He's the editor, Time International, a former Baghdad bureau chief. He knows the subject well. Here's the key question right now. And it's a question I never thought we'd be asking, at least at this point. Is Baghdad next? How vulnerable is the capital of Iraq, given these other cities that have now been taken over by these al-Qaeda-affiliated Islamist terrorists?
Well, logic suggests that Baghdad should be the safest place in Iraq. That is where the elite Iraqi troops, if such a thing exists anymore, that's where the elite Iraqi troops are positioned. However, if you told me a week ago that Mosul would have fallen, I might have told you pretty much the same thing, that a city that big cannot possibly fall to a fairly small group of terrorists. So the big question is, will those soldiers surrounding Baghdad, will they stand and fight? If they do, then with only 8,000 or 9,000 men, the ISIS is stretched quite thin across the length of Iraq, and they should quite easily be repulsed. But if the Iraqi soldiers don't stand and fight, then any city can be taken.
Well, the Iraqi soldiers, Bobby, in Mosul, they didn't stand and fight. They took off their uniforms. They left. These forces, these insurgents, whatever you want to call them, they came in. They took over the city. They took over the banks. There are reports that they've already ransacked those banks to a tune of about $500 million, and all of that U.S. military equipment that American troops left behind now in the hands of these guys. What's going on?
Well, the Mosul is the most shocking of all, because among other things, Mosul has a illustrious history as the city that has provided many of Iraq's military commanders over the decades. And Mosul, people of Mosul take pride in that military leadership history. So it is especially damning when a city like that falls. In Baghdad, what Maliki and some other Shiite leaders seem to be trying to do, in addition to having their military, they're trying to raise Shiite militias. That was not the case in the north, which tends to be mostly Kurdish and Sunni. If the Shiite militias can stand alongside the Iraqi military and hold back the ISIS's advance, then Baghdad has a chance. But it is a pretty damning thing when the prime minister of the country feels it necessary to call on private militias to stand up and protect the capital.
It sounds to me, Jim, and you've been studying this, it looks like they're going back to the bad old days in Iraq of a civil war, maybe like in Syria, where you got the Sunnis on one side, the Shiites on another side. We had hoped, of course, that was over with, but it looks like they're getting back into that.
Yeah, and that's the worry. I mean, you have Muqtada al-Sadr, the Shia cleric, offering to reconvene, in effect, his Mahdi army. If you remember from the mid-2000s, if that is the secret to solving this problem here, and that's a real problem, that you're reverting to these, as Bobby said, these ethnic militias. And also, bigger picture as well. This shows the limits of the train and equip strategy of the Obama administration that you've seen in Iraq, you've seen it in Libya, in Mali, in other places where you've trained up those troops, and those troops often haven't been up to the task of pushing back Islamic forces. And that, of course, is a cautionary tale as the U.S. prepares to withdraw troops from Afghanistan, because training and equipping Afghan forces a key part of the stability going forward.
Back in 2003, Bobby, the President George W. Bush, he was upbeat, looking to Iraq's future. Listen to what he said.
A liberated Iraq can show the power of freedom to transform that vital region by bringing hope and progress into the lives of millions. America's interest in security and America's belief in liberty both lead in the same direction, to a free and peaceful Iraq.
That was clearly the hope, Bobby. I remember when I was in Fallujah in Mosul back in 2005. Even then, I was there with General Abbasid, the central commander. There were a lot of concerns at the time that this was not necessarily going to work out as so many had hoped.
Yes, I was in Baghdad and watching that speech on television with a number of Iraqi friends and colleagues, and there was a brief moment for maybe the summer of 2003 when that hope existed, but it was then put out very quickly by some very poor decisions by the Bush administration, and then beyond that, after the American withdrawal, by a series of incredibly poor decisions by Nouri al-Maliki, the prime minister. And so there are no Iraqis left, I'm pretty sure, who are holding on to that hope anymore.
Yeah, so those hopes have clearly faded. Bobby Ghosh, Jim Sciutto. Guys, thanks very much. We'll stay on top of this story because the stakes clearly are enormous. Still ahead.